This is a story about trust, betrayal, and a mother who refused to be erased. A story that proves love is not proven by words, but by who shows up when everything is taken away. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more powerful true-style stories, and comment below which country you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. The call came at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, standing at my kitchen window in Toronto, watching soft snow drift down onto the quiet street below. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam curling into the air. At my age, sleep doesn't come easily anymore. When my phone rang, I didn't expect anything unusual. Then I saw the name. My brother Gregory. We hadn't spoken in nearly a month. Not since our last strained visit to our mother's nursing home. The kind of visit where words are polite but hearts are guarded. I answered anyway. "Lydia," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Flat in a way that made my stomach tighten instantly. "I have some difficult news." I gripped the edge of the counter. "What is it?" "Mom passed away last night." Peacefully. In her sleep. For a moment the world went silent. "What?" I whispered. "That's not possible. I was going to visit her today." "I've already made arrangements," he continued, not pausing. "The funeral is Friday." Friday. 3 days away. Then his tone changed. The softness vanished, replaced by something sharp, transactional. "Oh, and Lydia, the will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The house. The cottage. Her investments. All of it. You're not listed. Don't bother contesting it." And then the line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone, my reflection faintly visible in the dark glass of the window. My mother was dead. And my brother's first concern wasn't comfort. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even pretending to care. It was making sure I got nothing. Something was very, very wrong. Let me step back for a moment. My name is Lydia Harrison. I'm 63 years old, a retired civil engineer. I spent 4 decades designing roads, bridges, and public infrastructure across Ontario. After my husband passed away from cancer 3 years ago, my world shrank quickly. Our only daughter, Claire, lives in Vancouver now. And my mother, Helen, became my anchor. She was 85, sharp as ever. A retired schoolteacher who could recite poetry from memory and beat anyone at Scrabble. She lived independently until about 9 months ago, when Gregory insisted she needed extra help. He suggested becoming her power of attorney, just to manage bills and appointments, he'd said. Mom hesitated, but Gregory had always been persuasive. He was the baby, the charming one, the one who needed rescuing more often than he admitted. Within weeks of him gaining control, everything changed. Suddenly, Mom was diagnosed with severe dementia. Suddenly, she was moved into Maple Grove Care Center. Suddenly, the woman who corrected crossword puzzles for fun stared blankly at the wall. When I visited her, my heart broke. She barely spoke, didn't recognize me, sat slumped in a chair, drugged into silence. The doctor assured me it was normal. "Dementia can progress rapidly," he said smoothly, but something never sat right with me. I visited 3 times a week anyway, held her hand, talked to her, told her about Claire, about the volunteer work I'd started doing after retirement. Gregory visited too, but rarely. Always rushed. Always checking his watch. And now, standing in my kitchen after that phone call, everything clicked. This wasn't grief. This was greed. My hands shaking, I called Maple Grove Care Center. "I'm calling about my mother, Helen Harrison," I said. "I was told she passed away last night." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the nurse replied slowly, "but your mother is alive. She's having breakfast right now." My knees nearly buckled. "Please," I said quickly, "don't tell anyone I called. Especially not my brother." I hung up and immediately called my daughter. "Mom," Claire answered. "What's wrong?" "Your uncle just told me Grandma died," I said. "But she didn't. She's alive." There was silence. Then Claire said quietly, "Mom, that's elder abuse." And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Whatever Gregory was planning, he was running out of time. But what I discovered next, hidden inside my mother's finances, would prove this wasn't just theft. It was something far darker. I didn't drive to Maple Grove that morning. I drove to the bank. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my chest felt tight with something between fear and fury. I had spent most of my adult life reading blueprints, contracts, and compliance documents. Numbers never scared me. Paperwork never lied, not if you knew how to read it. And if Gregory had already told me our mother was dead when she was very much alive, then paperwork was exactly where the truth would be hiding. The bank lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. A young teller smiled politely as I approached. "I need to review recent transactions on my mother's accounts," I said calmly. "I'm her daughter." The smile faded. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Only the power of attorney can access that information." I nodded. "I understand. That's why I'd like to speak to a manager." 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a middle-aged woman named Karen in a glass-walled office. I explained everything slowly, carefully. Gregory's call, the nursing home, the lie about our mother's death. Karen's expression hardened. "Do you have any reason to believe financial abuse is taking place?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "And I believe my mother is in danger." That sentence changed everything. Within minutes, Karen pulled up flagged activity on the screen. Her eyebrows knit together as she scrolled. "Large withdrawals," she murmured. "New beneficiaries added. Life insurance policies adjusted." My heart pounded. "Adjusted how?" She turned the screen slightly toward me. My mother's life insurance policy, one I knew well, had been modified 3 weeks earlier. The beneficiary had been changed to Gregory, sole beneficiary, and the payout amount had been increased. How could that happen? I whispered. She wouldn't have agreed to that. Karen hesitated. The changes were authorized using power of attorney documentation and a medical capacity assessment. The words felt like ice water. "What assessment?" I asked. She printed the document and slid it across the desk. The letterhead read, "Maple Grove Care Center," signed by a physician I barely recognized. It stated that Helen Harrison was mentally unfit to manage her affairs and required full financial oversight. I stared at the signature. It was dated 2 days before Gregory told me she was declining rapidly. 2 days before she was moved into long-term care. 2 days before everything began disappearing. "This is fraud," I said. Karen nodded slowly. "I agree. And because you've raised concerns, I'm required to file an internal alert." She leaned forward. "You need to contact Adult Protective Services immediately." I left the bank with copies of everything and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Gregory hadn't just planned to cut me out. He had planned to erase our mother. I drove straight to Maple Grove. This time I didn't ask permission. Mom was sitting in the same chair by the window, sunlight falling softly across her silver hair. A breakfast tray sat untouched beside her. "Mom," I said gently, kneeling in front of her. Her eyes flickered, then focused. "Lydia," she whispered. My breath caught. "You know me." She nodded weakly. "They give me pills. Makes my head foggy." I swallowed hard. "Did Gregory bring papers for you to sign?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes," she said. "He said it was for my care. He said you agreed." My vision blurred. I stood slowly and walked straight to the nurse's station. "I want a full medication list," I said firmly. "Now." The nurse hesitated. "I'll need authorization." "I'm calling the police," I interrupted. "And Adult Protective Services. And a lawyer. You can either cooperate or explain later why you didn't." She disappeared into the back. Within an hour, APS arrived. So did a detective. By evening, Gregory's name was officially flagged. That night my phone rang. It was him. "You're overreacting," he said smoothly. "Mom's sick. You're emotional." "You told me she was dead," I replied coldly. Silence. Then his voice hardened. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "You did." I hung up before he could respond, because for the first time the fear had shifted. It wasn't mine anymore. But what the toxicology report revealed the next morning would prove this was never just about money. It was about timing. And someone had been counting down. The toxicology report arrived less than 24 hours later. I was sitting in my living room when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of day that presses in on you without warning. "Miss Harrison?" a man asked. "This is Detective Rowan." I straightened. "Yes. We ran the preliminary tox screen on your mother's blood," he said. "There are sedatives present that were never prescribed." My heart dropped. "What kind of sedatives?" "A combination," he replied carefully. "Strong enough to suppress cognition, memory, and motor response. In higher doses, potentially fatal." I closed my eyes. They hadn't been treating dementia. They had been manufacturing it. The detective continued. "These medications were administered consistently over several weeks. The dosage increased shortly after the life insurance changes." There it was. The countdown. Gregory had been slowly pushing her toward an ending that would look natural, convenient, irreversible. I drove to Maple Grove immediately. This time the atmosphere felt different. Tense. Staff whispered. Doors closed more quickly than before. I found my mother in her room, staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap. "Mom," I said softly, "they're changing your medications." She turned toward me, eyes clearer than I'd seen in months. "I feel less heavy today," she said. "Like I'm waking up." I held her hand, fighting tears. "You are." The APS caseworker arrived soon after with a nurse practitioner. They reviewed her chart together, page by page. Medications were halted. Blood work ordered. Observations documented. By the afternoon, my mother was speaking in full sentences again. And by evening, Gregory showed up. I saw him through the glass doors of the ward before he saw me. His posture was stiff. His jaw clenched. "What's going on?" he demanded as he approached. "Why wasn't I notified of these changes?" "Because you're under investigation," I said calmly. He laughed, sharp and hollow. "For what?" "Taking care of my mother." "For poisoning her," I replied. His face drained of color. "That's insane," he snapped. "You're imagining things. You've always been dramatic." The detective stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "we need you to come with us." Gregory backed away instinctively. "You can't prove anything." "Oh, we can," the detective said. "The pharmacy logs alone." Gregory turned and ran. He didn't make it far. They caught him just outside the parking lot. Watching him being led away in handcuffs, I expected to feel satisfaction. I felt grief instead. That night, I sat beside my mother's bed as machines hummed quietly around us. "I never meant to cause trouble," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting you." "You did," I said, brushing her hair back. "You're still here." But the story wasn't over. 2 days later, the detective called again. "We executed a search warrant on your brother's home," he said. "There's something you need to see." At the station, he laid photos across the table. Documents, notes, timelines, and one notebook. On the first page, written in Gregory's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "End of life plan, final phase." My stomach twisted. Inside were dates, dosages, bank transfers, and one final entry circled in red ink. Friday, the day he had told me she was already dead. "She had days," the detective said quietly. "Maybe hours." I left the station shaking. Gregory hadn't been hoping she'd pass. He had been scheduling it. And if I hadn't answered that phone call when I did, I didn't finish the thought. Instead, I went home and called a lawyer. Because saving my mother was only half the fight. Now I had to make sure the truth survived. But just when we thought the worst was over, the will surfaced. And it wasn't the one we remembered. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and polished wood. I sat across from him, hands folded tightly in my lap, while my mother rested at the hospital under observation. Her mind was clearer now, but her body was still recovering from weeks of chemical suppression. Every hour felt fragile. "I don't understand how this happened," I said quietly. "We had a will. We discussed it years ago." The lawyer nodded. "That's usually when people don't think to look again." He slid a document across the desk. "This is the most recent will filed with the court." I stared at the pages. Gregory's name appeared everywhere. Sole executor. Sole beneficiary. Full authority. My name appeared once. Listed as previously considered. I felt physically ill. This isn't hers, I said. She would never. The will is legally executed, the lawyer interrupted gently. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized. I laughed bitterly. By the same nursing home doctor who falsified her medical records? He raised an eyebrow. Exactly. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something like hope flicker. Undue influence, he said. Coercion. Medical incapacity. Fraud. Can we stop it? I asked. Yes, he replied. But it won't be quick. The next weeks were consumed by hearings, affidavits, and depositions. I spent my days between the courthouse and my mother's bedside, watching her slowly come back to herself. One afternoon she looked at me with clear eyes and said, "Your brother tried to kill me." The words landed heavily between us. "Yes," I said softly. She nodded once. "Then I want the truth told." Gregory's defense was predictable. He claimed he was overwhelmed, that he made mistakes, that he was trying to protect family assets from an emotionally unstable sister. When I heard that in court, I didn't flinch. I had built bridges in blizzards. I had buried a husband. I had raised a daughter alone. I wasn't unstable. I was inconvenient. Then came the testimony that cracked everything open. A junior nurse from Maple Grove took the stand. Her hands shook as she spoke. "He instructed us to increase the dosage," she said quietly. "He said it was palliative care. Did you question it?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," she replied. "But he said she wouldn't be around much longer anyway." The courtroom fell silent. Gregory stared straight ahead. The judge ordered an immediate suspension of the will. Gregory was denied bail that afternoon. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than any statement. That evening, I sat with my mother as the sun dipped low through the hospital window. "I thought I was a burden," she said suddenly. "I thought he was helping." "You were never a burden," I said firmly. She squeezed my hand. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't let him rewrite history." "I won't," I said. But history wasn't finished with us yet. Because 2 days later, my lawyer called with urgency in his voice. "There's a second will," he said. "Older. Hidden. Filed years ago. And recently removed from storage." "Removed by who?" I asked. "Gregory," he replied. "Before his arrest." My chest tightened. "Do we have a copy?" "Yes," he said. "And Lydia, it names you." But when we discovered why Gregory hid that will, we realized this case wasn't just about inheritance. It was about erasing a witness. The older will was dated 11 years earlier. I sat in my lawyer's office again, this time with my daughter Claire beside me, as he laid the pages out carefully, as if they might crumble under the weight of what they represented. "This one is clean," he said. "No suspicious witnesses. No medical concerns. Your mother was fully independent." I scanned the document. It named both Gregory and me evenly. The house split in half. The cottage to Claire someday. Charitable donations my mother had talked about for years. This was her voice. Clear. Thoughtful. Fair. "So why hide it?" Claire asked quietly. My lawyer didn't hesitate. "Because this will made Lydia indispensable." I frowned. "Indispensable how?" He tapped the final page. "Your mother added a clause," he said. "A personal affidavit." I read it slowly, my throat tightening with every line. "If at any point I am declared mentally unfit under circumstances I do not understand. If my medical treatment changes suddenly without my clear consent. If my estate is altered while I am alive. Then I ask that my daughter Lydia speak on my behalf. She knows my wishes. She knows my voice." I had to stop reading. My mother had seen this coming. "She was afraid," I whispered. "Yes," my lawyer said. "And Gregory knew this affidavit would give you credibility. So he removed the will." That was the moment I understood. Gregory hadn't just tried to take everything. He had tried to silence the only person who could contradict him. In the weeks that followed, the case shifted dramatically. Prosecutors added new charges: tampering with legal documents, coercion, attempted manslaughter. Gregory stopped speaking entirely. No calls. No letters. No defense statements. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. I testified for nearly 4 hours. I spoke about my mother's sharp mind, her routines, her humor, the way she corrected my grammar even at 85. I spoke about the sudden fog, the unexplained medications, the lie about her death. Gregory didn't look at me once. Then my mother took the stand. The room held its breath as she walked slowly to the chair, leaning on a cane. "Mrs. Harrison," the prosecutor said gently, "do you recognize this document?" "Yes," she replied clearly. "It's my will." "And did you authorize the newer version?" "No," she said firmly. "I was drugged." The defense tried to object. The judge overruled. "Why do you believe your son did this?" the prosecutor asked. My mother paused. "Because he was afraid," she said. "Afraid I would change my mind. Afraid I would speak." Gregory's shoulders sagged. That afternoon, the verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty. On all counts. Gregory was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. As he was led away, he finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes. Only something hollow. The kind of emptiness that comes when control is gone. Life didn't return to normal after that. It became quieter. Slower. My mother moved in with me while her strength returned. We spent mornings drinking tea, afternoons reading, evenings watching old films. One night, she reached across the table and held my hand. "You saved me," she said. "No," I replied softly. "You saved yourself." I just listened. Months later, the estate was restored. The will was honored. But something else happened too. Adult Protective Services used my mother's case to revise oversight policies at Maple Grove. 2 staff members lost their licenses. New safeguards were introduced. And my mother, the retired schoolteacher, became the quiet reason dozens of others were protected. I thought the story ended there. I was wrong. Because 1 year later, I received a letter from prison. From Gregory. Inside that envelope was a confession he never gave in court. And a name none of us expected. The envelope was thin. No return address, just my name written in careful, deliberate handwriting I recognized instantly. My hands hovered over it for a long moment before I opened it, as if the paper itself might burn. Claire watched from the kitchen doorway. "You don't have to read it," she said. "I do," I replied. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting. No apology. Just words. "Lydia, you were right about one thing. I didn't act alone." My breath caught. He went on. "The doctor wasn't the first. He was the last. There were others before him. Quiet ones. Ones who asked fewer questions. This system is built for people like me." I sat down heavily at the table. Claire moved closer. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "he's admitting this wasn't a one-time crime." The letter described meetings in dim offices. Suggestions framed as options. Conversations about liability, not life. "No one questions a grieving son," he wrote. "No one questions paperwork." He named one person. A case management consultant who specialized in elder transitions. A woman. I read the name twice. Then I folded the letter and called Detective Rowan. "This isn't over," I told him. "No," he agreed. "It rarely is." Within weeks, the investigation widened. Records were pulled. Complaints resurfaced. Families who had lost elderly parents under natural decline were contacted. Patterns emerged. Sudden medication changes. Last-minute estate revisions. Estranged relatives cut out. And always the same consultant's signature somewhere in the margins. One afternoon, I accompanied my mother to give a statement. The consultant sat across the room, hands folded neatly in her lap, expression unreadable. "She encouraged me to trust my son," my mother said calmly. "She said resistance only caused suffering." "And did you feel pressured?" the investigator asked. "Yes," my mother replied. "I felt erased." That was the word. Erased. The consultant was arrested 3 months later. Charges followed. So did headlines. A network uncovered. A quiet industry built on silence. When it was finally over, truly over, I expected relief. Instead, I felt something heavier. Responsibility. Because once you see the cracks in a system, you can't pretend they aren't there. I began speaking publicly. At hospitals. At senior centers. At legal conferences. I told my mother's story with her permission, not as tragedy but as warning. People listened. Policies changed. But the most important moment came one autumn afternoon at home. My mother sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl watching leaves fall. "You should let it go now," she said gently. "I can't," I replied. "Not yet." She smiled. "You already did what you needed to do. The rest is living." That night, I placed Gregory's letter in a box and sealed it. Some truths need to be known. Others need to be released. But the final chapter of this story wasn't written in courtrooms or prison cells. It was written in a quiet decision that changed everything. The house felt different after everything ended. Not quieter, just lighter. My mother moved through the room slowly now, but with intention, as if reclaiming each space piece by piece. The fog that once clouded her eyes was gone. In its place was something steadier. Awareness. Resolve. One afternoon she asked me to sit with her at the dining table. "I want to make changes," she said. I knew what she meant. This time there were no lawyers rushing her. No forms slid across the table with hidden meanings. Just a notebook, a pen, and time. She rewrote her will by hand first, not because it was legally binding, but because she wanted to hear her own voice again. "I don't want my life reduced to assets," she said quietly. "I want it to mean something." Weeks later, the final version was signed. Part of her estate went to Claire's education fund, part to women's shelters, part to elder advocacy programs, and part, a modest intentional part, went to Gregory. Not as forgiveness, as closure. "I don't want him to believe he won," she told me. "But I also don't want to be defined by anger." I understood that then. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's choosing not to carry poison forward. Life settled into a rhythm. Morning walks. Shared meals. Evenings filled with stories I had never heard before. About her childhood, her students, the women she admired, and the mistakes she made. One night she looked at me and said, "You became my voice when I couldn't speak." I shook my head. "You taught me how." Years passed. My mother lived to see 90. She passed quietly at home, with music playing softly and my hand in hers. This time the call I received was different. There was no rush, no manipulation, no lies, only truth. At her memorial, people I had never met came forward. A nurse who changed her career after hearing my mother's story. A woman who contested an abusive guardianship. A lawyer who specialized in elder rights because of one case she couldn't forget. My mother's life didn't end when someone tried to erase her. It expanded. Later, as I packed away her things, I found the notebook she had written in that first afternoon. On the last page there was a sentence addressed to me. "Speak when it's uncomfortable. Stay when it's easier to leave. And never let love be mistaken for silence." That is why I'm telling this story now. Because somewhere, someone is listening who feels something is wrong, but hasn't yet found the courage to say it. If that's you, let this be your reminder. You are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. And your voice matters more than you think. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more real, powerful stories, and comment below which country you're watching from. Your voice, like hers, deserves to be heard.